Have you ever wondered why certain people slowly drift away from you without ever telling you why? Respect doesn't vanish in an instant. It erodes quietly, like water carving into stone, until one day you realize the foundation is gone. What makes it worse is that most of the time, it's not betrayal or some grand mistake that costs us respect. It's the small habits, repeated in silence, that whisper to others, "This person cannot be trusted. This person does not carry weight." I've seen it in my own life. Moments when I thought my words were harmless, my actions insignificant. But over time, they shaped how others measured me. And the truth is, people are always watching, even when they say nothing. The Stoics warned us of this long ago. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to act, not argue. Seneca urged us to observe ourselves with ruthless honesty. Respect is not taken, it is built or destroyed in the smallest of choices. Today, we'll uncover 4 habits that quietly dismantle your image. Some may sting, but facing them is the first step to becoming someone others cannot ignore. Stay with me. As we step into the first chapter, picture a quiet room filled with whispers. Faces lean closer, voices drop, laughter cuts through the air like a knife disguised as silk. On the surface, it feels harmless, even bonding, but beneath that laughter, something fragile always breaks. Gossip, the silent poison of relationships. It seeps into spaces unnoticed, eroding trust grain by grain until nothing solid remains. You think you are part of the circle, but really you are marking yourself as someone who cannot be trusted. And trust, once fractured, is almost impossible to restore. Now imagine yourself standing in the middle of that room. Your name is not on anyone's lips, yet you hear how quickly they dismantle another person's life as if it were a cheap story. A detail here, a rumor there, a private moment twisted into entertainment. A voice inside you asks the question you try to ignore. If they speak of her this way, how will they speak of me when I am gone? That is the cruel math of gossip. Whoever gossips to you will gossip about you, and when you participate, even with a smile or a nod, you've joined in declaring yourself unreliable. The Stoics saw through this long ago. Epictetus warned, "If it is not your concern, don't say it, don't repeat it, and don't even listen to it. Because when you feed on the failures of others, you show your hunger is small, not noble." Seneca once said the mark of wisdom is to look at yourself with honesty, and honesty reveals this. Every time you pass on a story that is not yours to tell, you shrink. You tell the world, "My dignity is negotiable. My respect can be sold for a cheap laugh." That is the unspoken message, and it lands deeper than words. I remember when this lesson struck me like a cold wind. In college, gossip was everywhere, almost a ritual. Every table in the cafeteria turned into a court where others' lives were judged. Who was with whom, who had failed, who had stumbled, and one day a girl, we'll call her Sarah, became the subject. She was quiet, reserved, and someone whispered she had a crush on a classmate. Within hours, it spread across the group. A small, tender truth turned into a punchline. I will never forget how she slowly withdrew, how she stopped speaking, how her eyes lowered each time she walked into the room. That silence she carried was heavier than the laughter that had broken her. That moment revealed gossip for what it is, not entertainment, but a wound dressed in laughter, leaving echoes long after the words fade. What looks like casual talk leaves behind wounds that change how people move, how they trust, how they see the world. Gossip does not just damage the one being spoken of, it stains everyone involved, even the listener. Because silence in the face of gossip is not neutral, it is permission. Here's where Marcus Aurelius's words echo: waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. In the context of gossip, that means you stand apart. You don't laugh when the crowd laughs. You don't spread the fire when the spark is offered to you. You let it die in your hands. That refusal is power. Because while small minds discuss people and average minds discuss events, great minds discuss ideas. Every day you choose which mind you want to cultivate. Its danger lies in disguise. It pretends to bond, but what it really weaves is fear. It feels like a shortcut to closeness, to having something to say. But it is false intimacy. What binds people together through gossip is not trust. It is fear. Fear of being the next subject. Fear of being left out. And fear never builds real respect. It only builds a fragile alliance that breaks as soon as you step away. So what do? You practice the discipline of silence. You practice redirecting. When someone brings you a rumor, you ask them about their own life, their own dreams. When the group turns into a tribunal, you shift the focus to an idea, a challenge, a story of growth. It may seem small, even awkward at first, but slowly people begin to notice. They see that you do not trade in the currency of betrayal. They see that their secrets are safe with you, and without you ever asking, respect begins to form around your name. I once met a professor who embodied this without ever preaching it. In a faculty meeting, gossip about a student began to swirl. He sat, calm, silent, and when the wave of whispers reached him, he simply said, "Let's talk about how to help her improve, not about who she is." And just like that, the air shifted. The poison lost its grip. He didn't moralize, he redirected. In that single act, he showed what strength looks like in silence. I never forgot it. From here, ask yourself, what kind of presence do you want to be? The one who entertains by tearing others down, or the one who elevates by choosing words that build? The answer defines more than your conversations. It defines the atmosphere you carry into every room. When you gossip, you tell people you are weak. When you rise above it, you tell them you are worthy of their trust. This is where the Stoic path becomes clear. It's not about memorizing lofty phrases. It's about daily choices. To let a secret die in your chest. To turn a cruel story into silence. To elevate instead of erode. In these small acts lies your character. And character, once solid, commands respect without asking for it. So choose wisely. Because every time you open your mouth, you reveal the weight of your soul. Gossip lightens you in the worst way, making you hollow. Silence, guided by integrity, makes you dense, unshakable, impossible to ignore. Respect is not built in public speeches or grand gestures. It is built in these hidden moments, when no one claps for you, when no one praises you, but people remember. They always remember, and that is the first step, to guard your tongue, to refuse the poison, to become the person others can trust when the room fills with whispers. From here, we step into the next habit, one that destroys respect even faster, when your word itself loses its weight. Moving into the second chapter, imagine handing someone a key with your name engraved on it. That key opens the door of trust. Every time you make a promise, whether small or great, you are giving them that key. But here is the danger. If the door doesn't open when they turn it, if it sticks or swings into emptiness, they stop trying. And once they stop trying, respect withers. Reliability is not decoration. It is the skeleton of trust. When it collapses, everything else falls with it. Now, pause and think. How many times have you said, "I'll be there," and didn't show up? How many times did you promise a change you never made, or gave a nod you didn't mean? In the moment, it feels harmless. You tell yourself, people will understand, but they don't forget. Each broken word is a small betrayal. And those betrayals add up until one day your name no longer carries weight. The Stoics placed immense value on the power of one's word. As Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more valuable than the commitment of a person of integrity, not wealth, not charm, not eloquence, integrity, because words are not just sounds, they are contracts. When your words lose value, you lose value right along with them. I once learned this truth painfully." A friend named Emily spent weeks preparing for her birthday. She poured herself into it, every detail chosen with care, every decoration reflecting her joy. She invited me with genuine warmth, and I looked her in the eye and said, "I'll be there, I wouldn't miss it for anything." But when the day came, I let myself be swept into something else, something trivial. I told myself I'd explain later. By the time I sent a rushed message, the party had already begun. Her reply was polite, but it was cold. And in that coldness, I felt the fracture. It wasn't just a party I missed. It was a piece of her trust. And once gone, that piece never returned. Reliability is not built with grand gestures. It is built in the smallest of consistencies, showing up on time, finishing what you start, admitting when you cannot instead of pretending that you can. It is these small, almost invisible acts that accumulate into something unshakable. A person whose word aligns with their actions radiates quiet authority. No speeches needed, no arguments necessary. Their consistency speaks for them. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Imagine living by that standard. Every word measured, every promise honored. No excuses, no embellishments, just alignment. Such a person may not be the loudest in the room, but when they speak, others lean in, because they know the words are not empty. Think of reliability as a currency. Each kept promise is a deposit into the account of trust. Each broken promise is a withdrawal. Keep withdrawing, and eventually the account is empty. But build it steadily, and one day when the stakes are highest, that account will speak for you louder than any declaration. People will trust you, not because of what you say now, but because of what your life has proven over time. I once had a mentor who embodied this principle. He was not flamboyant. He didn't dominate conversations. But when he said, "I'll take care of it," you could set your watch by it. His yes meant yes. His no meant no. And over years, that reputation made him indispensable. When the toughest projects appeared, he was chosen, not for charisma, but for trust. His reliability was his influence, and it was unshakable. Here is the paradox. Honesty, even when disappointing, preserves respect. People would rather hear a clear no than be soothed with a false yes. A no shows integrity. A broken yes shows weakness. Many fear saying no because they think it will make them less liked. But the opposite is true. A firm no delivered with clarity earns more respect than a yes that collapses later. The Stoics were relentless about this. Epictetus warned against speaking what you cannot live. To him, unreliability was not just a social flaw, it was a fracture in the soul. And here's the deeper truth. When you fail to honor your word, you don't just let others down, you let yourself down. Slowly, you stop trusting your own voice. You say one thing, do another, and your self-respect erodes. But when your words and actions are one, you begin to trust yourself. That trust radiates outward, becoming confidence others can feel. Picture a stone bridge across a rushing river. Each promise kept is another stone placed carefully in the foundation. With time, the bridge grows solid, strong enough for others to walk across with confidence. But every broken promise is a crack. Too many cracks, and the bridge weakens. People hesitate to cross. Eventually, they turn away. That is what happens when reliability fails, and once the bridge collapses, rebuilding it takes years. So what is the way forward? Start small. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Wake when you said you would. Finish the task you began. Honor your own word before demanding others honor it. These small victories are training, and that training builds the discipline to keep promises to others. Discipline is the soil. Reliability is the harvest. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." The same applies to promises. It is not the person who says little that lacks value, but the one who speaks more than they can uphold who becomes poor in trust. Speak less. Deliver more. That is the equation of respect. At this stage, you must choose. Will your words remain cheap, scattered like leaves in the wind? Or will they become iron, few but unbreakable? The choice defines the respect you carry into every room. Because at the end of the day, talent may open the door, charm may win attention, but only reliability keeps you inside. And from here, the path leads to another silent destroyer of respect, when your impatience takes control and your anxiety speaks louder than your willingness to listen. Advancing to the third chapter, imagine a river flowing steadily, carrying ideas like water over smooth stones. Now picture someone throwing rocks into that current, breaking the flow, scattering the rhythm, disrupting the silence of what could have been. That is what an interruption feels like. It seems small, almost harmless, but over time, those rocks pile up, and the water can no longer move freely. Conversations lose their flow, trust loses its depth, and respect quietly drains away. Now ask yourself, how often do you let another finish their thought? How often do you hear their words all the way through without the urge to jump in? The temptation is strong. We tell ourselves we're helping, energizing the dialogue, making it more dynamic. But the truth is harder. Every interruption carries an unspoken message. What I have to say matters more than what you are saying now. Spoken once, it might pass unnoticed. Repeated over time, it erodes respect like acid eating away at stone. I know this pattern because I lived it. In the early days of my career, I was fueled by anxiety disguised as enthusiasm. Eager to prove my worth, I filled the air with words. If someone hesitated, I jumped in. If I disagreed, I cut them off. If I thought of something clever, I rushed to insert it before the thought could vanish. Meeting after meeting, I confused volume with value. Until one day, my manager, calm, steady, unshaken, pulled me aside. She looked me in the eye and said words I've never forgotten. "You're always ready to speak, but rarely ready to listen." Those words struck me like lightning because they were true. I wasn't listening, I was performing, I wasn't engaging, I was waiting for my turn. What I thought was enthusiasm was ego. What I thought was contribution was interruption. In that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't respected as much as I thought. I was tolerated, and tolerance is a fragile foundation. The Stoics held listening as a virtue equal to wisdom. Epictetus, who knew the harsh silence of slavery before he knew the freedom of philosophy, reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more and speak less." That ratio is not an accident. It is a call to discipline, a reminder that speech without restraint is noise, but listening with presence is strength. From that day forward, I began what I call stoic listening. It wasn't natural at first. Each time I felt the urge to interrupt, I caught myself. I took a breath. I asked silently, "Does this need to be said right now, or can it wait?" That pause was uncomfortable. My anxiety screamed, but slowly the pause became power. My colleagues began to see me differently, not as frantic, but as steady, not as self-centered, but as present. When I finally did speak, my words carried more weight, not because they were more brilliant, but because they were fewer. Here is the paradox. Listening makes you visible. People think silence makes them invisible, but it doesn't. True listening stands out because it is rare. In a world drowning in noise, attention is gold. And when you give that gift to another, your full presence, they remember, they trust you more, they respect you more. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can show me I am mistaken, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." To live this way requires listening, not waiting for your turn, but genuinely opening yourself to the possibility that another person's words may reshape your own. That is humility, that is courage, and that is strength. Think of listening like holding a mirror. When you give someone your silence, your patience, you reflect their humanity back to them. You tell them, "You matter here. Your voice has value." That reflection builds bonds stronger than agreement ever could, and in return, you gain clarity. You learn what you would have missed had you cut them off. You hear perspectives that widen your judgment. You sharpen your ability to see not just your own path, but the patterns of others. That kind of insight makes you harder to fool, harder to provoke, harder to shake. I remember a heated meeting where tensions ran high, voices colliding like thunderclaps. My old self would have jumped into the storm, eager to prove a point, but I chose silence. I listened. I watched, and when the noise finally died down, I spoke one sentence, calm, deliberate, grounded. The room shifted. Not because I was smarter, not because my point was revolutionary, but because I had waited. And when I spoke, it landed. That moment taught me this. Silence is not absence, it is strategy. Here's the harder truth. Interrupting is not about others, it is about you. It exposes impatience. It reveals insecurity. It shows that you fear silence, that you cannot sit with someone else's presence without inserting your own. But listening, that is control. It says, "I do not need to prove myself in every second. I can wait, I can hear, I can respond when the time is right." That posture is strength, and it is contagious. The more you listen, the more others begin to listen in return. Meetings shift, conversations deepen, respect multiplies. Because when you honor the voices around you, you give people permission to honor yours. Seneca reminded us, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That is what listening proves. That you have mastered your own impulses enough to remain still while others rush to speak. That mastery shows, and people recognize it even if they cannot name it. They call it calm. They call it presence. What it really is discipline. So, here is the practice. Let the other person finish, not just out of courtesy, but out of respect for yourself. Train your impatience like you would train a restless horse. Rein it in, guide it, direct it. Each time you resist the urge to cut in, you strengthen not only your relationships, but your character. At this stage, you face a choice. Will you be the one remembered as always speaking but rarely listening? Or the one whose presence is so attentive, so rare, that when you finally do speak, your words echo? Respect does not grow in noise. It grows in silence, in patience, in presence. And from here, the journey leads to one final danger to address, not the noise of interruptions, but the constant hum of complaint, where negativity becomes identity and drains respect before you even notice. Entering the fourth chapter, picture a room heavy with words that do not uplift. The voices aren't raised. No one is shouting, and yet the air feels suffocating. Why? Because every phrase is soaked in complaint about the weather, about the traffic, about a colleague, about life itself. Complaining is like smoke, invisible at first, almost harmless, but soon it fills the room, making it harder to breathe. We've all done it. That sigh behind the wheel when the road doesn't move, that mutter under our breath when the boss adds one more demand, that groan when the rain ruins our plans. On its own, it feels like release, like steam escaping from a boiling pot. But here's the danger. When complaint becomes habit, the release valve turns into a trap. What should free you ends up chaining you. Instead of leaving lighter, you become heavier, and worse, you share that weight with everyone around you. I know this cycle too well. There was a time when everything set me off. If it rained, I cursed the sky. If it was too hot, I cursed the sun. If someone wronged me, I carried that story like a badge, retelling it, reliving it, letting it infect my days. At first, I didn't notice the effect, but slowly, I realized people around me were pulling away. Not because I was cruel, not because I was incompetent, simply because I was draining. Being near me meant carrying my complaints, and no one wants to carry what someone else refuses to put down. One day, a friend, braver than most, looked at me and said, "Man, it seems like nothing is ever good enough for you. Have you noticed that?" My first instinct was to defend myself, to argue, to complain about being accused of complaining. But when the noise in my head settled, his words echoed. They stung because they were true. I had built an identity around dissatisfaction. I had become a victim of everything, and in doing so, I had surrendered my power. The Stoics teach us this: never complain about reality. Transform what is within your reach. Accept with serenity what is not. Marcus Aurelius, facing war, disease, and betrayal, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice his words, not outside events. He knew the storms of life cannot be controlled, but the storm inside, that is ours to calm. Complaining is the opposite of calm. It is the mind throwing its power away. When you complain, you hand authority to the rain, to the traffic, to the stranger who insulted you. You tell the world, "My peace depends on everything except me." And once you live that way, you cannot command respect. How could anyone respect a person who has abandoned control over themselves? So I began to shift, slowly, quietly. At first, I simply observed. Every time I felt the urge to complain, I paused. I asked one question: is this under my control? If yes, act. If no, accept. If the room I was in felt toxic, I chose to leave instead of poisoning myself further. If something went wrong, I looked for the lesson hidden inside. If there was truly no solution, I breathed deep and moved on. It wasn't easy. My old habits fought back. But each time I chose action or acceptance over complaint, something inside me grew lighter. The world did not change, but my posture toward it did, and people noticed. They no longer felt drained in my presence. Instead, they felt steadier, stronger. Because respect doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the vibration you carry. And a mind trapped in complaint carries heaviness that no one wants to share. Think of your mind like a radar. It locks onto whatever signal you train it for. If you feed it negativity, it will scan the horizon for chaos. Every mistake, every delay, every imperfection will feel like proof that the world is against you. But if you feed it gratitude, if you feed it constructive thought, it begins to find opportunity where others see only walls. The world itself doesn't change, but what you see in it does, and your life begins to mirror the vision you hold. I remember a morning when this truth tested me. I was stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, heart racing with irritation. My old self would have cursed every red light, pounding the steering wheel, arriving exhausted before the day even began. But that day I stopped. I reminded myself, the traffic is not mine to control, my reaction is. So I turned on an audiobook. I listened. I learned. By the time I arrived, I was calm, focused, and instead of carrying complaint into the room, I carried composure. That shift mattered more than I could see. Epictetus once warned that living as a victim means giving up freedom. Complaining is the victim's anthem. It says, "I am powerless," but you are not. You are always powerful over one thing, your mind. And when you protect that, you protect your dignity. So let me ask you directly, do your conversations energize or drain? Do you speak more of problems or solutions? Do you wear gratitude or dissatisfaction as your daily clothing? The answers reveal more than your habits. They reveal the respect you carry in the eyes of others, because no one respects someone drowning in complaints. But everyone notices the person who remains calm, constructive, grounded, even when storms rage around them. This is not about becoming naive. It is not blind optimism. Stoicism doesn't ask us to ignore pain or pretend all is well. It asks us to meet reality as it is, to act where we can and to accept where we cannot. And that is not weakness. That is power. Seneca wrote, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is." Complaining convinces you of misery. Gratitude convinces you of abundance. Both are available. Which one will you train your mind to see? If you're ready to choose gratitude, type that single word, gratitude, in the comments. Let it be a marker, not just of what you heard today, but of the choice you will carry forward. And if these words resonate, subscribe so you don't walk this path alone. Each step in Stoicism is lighter when shared. Respect, remember, is not built on brilliance. It is built on presence, and presence is defined by the energy you carry. Complaining leaks energy. Gratitude protects it. Action multiplies it. Acceptance steadies it. These are the qualities that command respect without ever needing to ask for it. From here, the picture becomes clear. Gossip poisons trust. Unreliability dissolves it. Interruptions weaken it, and constant complaint drowns it. Respect is not lost in one dramatic collapse. It slips away in the quiet repetition of these habits. But if you choose differently, if you live with discipline, with gratitude, with integrity, then every room you enter will feel the strength you carry. Yet awareness alone is not enough. Knowing what breaks us does not automatically make us whole. The cracks we've uncovered invite a harder question. What can we build in their place? Respect is not restored by simply avoiding the wrong path. It is reclaimed by walking the right one, with choices that align, with actions that endure. If corrosive habits wear us down like water carving stone, then intentional habits rebuild us layer by layer until our presence becomes unshakable. Now imagine stepping forward, not with avoidance, but with creation, not with silence born of fear, but with silence chosen as power. What follows is not about what must be abandoned, but about what must be embraced, the disciplines that transform presence into authority and integrity into lasting respect. Now think about this. How many people do you know who speak just to fill the air? How many times have you caught yourself saying something not because it was necessary, but because you feared silence? The truth is, silence unnerves most of us. It exposes us. Yet, when you master silence, when you choose words with intention instead of compulsion, you separate yourself from the crowd. Your voice becomes rarer, and because of that, it becomes more valuable. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus advised us not only to avoid gossip, but to discipline our tongues. He knew that words can enslave us if we throw them around carelessly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning to speak only what was essential and to let the rest pass unsaid. Their wisdom reveals a paradox. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry. I recall a mentor who embodied this. In meetings, while others competed to be heard, he sat calmly, listening. People mistook his silence for passivity until he spoke. His words were simple, sharp, undeniable. The room would fall quiet, not out of politeness, but because his silence had already commanded respect. His restraint was his strength, and it taught me something vital. Silence is not emptiness. It is power held in reserve. Here's where the lesson cuts deep. Gossip dies when it meets silence. Insults lose force when not repeated. Lies wither when denied the oxygen of attention. You do not need to fight every battle with words. Sometimes the greatest rebuttal is no rebuttal at all. A calm look, a steady presence, a refusal to give foolishness any stage. That is what it means to speak with intention, but silence alone is not enough. It must be coupled with thoughtful speech. Seneca wrote, "Speech that is restrained is better than speech that overflows." To choose your words with care is to show discipline. To ask yourself before you speak, does this build or destroy? Does this elevate or diminish? With that simple filter, your conversations transform. They stop being exchanges of noise and start becoming exchanges of value. Think of it like this. Imagine two fires. One burns wildly, consuming everything in its path, uncontrolled and exhausting. The other is steady, contained, radiating warmth and light. The first is the chatter of undisciplined speech. The second is the fire of measured words. Which one do you want to stand near? Which one would you respect? I once found myself at a dinner where gossip spread like wildfire. Every story twisted, every detail exaggerated. I felt the old urge to join in, to laugh, to add my piece. But I didn't. Instead, I asked a simple question. What do you think this person was going through when that happened? The room paused. The tone shifted. The fire cooled. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't moralizing. It was a redirection. And from that night on, people began to look at me differently. Not as the one who fueled the gossip, but as the one who refused to let it dominate. That is the power of thoughtful speech. It doesn't just protect your reputation. It shapes the energy of the spaces you enter. People begin to see you as someone safe, someone they can trust, someone whose words are not weapons but tools. And trust is the soil from which respect grows. This is where the Stoic discipline becomes practice. Each day, you are faced with choices: to speak or to stay silent, to feed gossip or to starve it, to spill words recklessly or to offer them carefully. Each choice builds or breaks the respect you carry. And here is the truth most ignore: respect is not demanded, it is inspired, and it is inspired most often by those who master themselves first. So ask yourself, when was the last time you let silence hold its ground? When was the last time you spoke fewer words, but with greater weight? The answers reveal more than habits, they reveal character. Here's the paradox to hold close: by speaking less, you will be heard more. By silencing gossip, you will be trusted more. By choosing words with care, you will be respected more. In the end, silence and speech are not enemies, they are allies. When mastered, they become instruments of dignity. At this stage, the path forward is clear. To separate yourself from the ordinary, guard your tongue. Let silence be your ally, and let your words be rare and deliberate. Because when you speak with intention, you no longer chase respect. It arrives quietly, unforced, and it stays. And from here, we turn to another foundation of respect, the discipline of reliability, where your actions speak louder than any promise you could make. Moving into the second chapter, imagine holding a fragile glass vessel in your hands. Inside it lies something invisible yet priceless, someone's trust in you. Each time you speak a promise, "I'll be there, I'll help, you can count on me," you're placing that vessel on a shelf with your name carved into it. Every action that follows either protects it or cracks it. And once it breaks, no apology can truly return it to what it was. Respect follows the same path. It shatters when reliability is lost. Now pause and reflect. How many times have you said yes while already knowing you couldn't deliver? How many times did you agree to something just to avoid conflict, or to appear kind, or because you feared missing out? In those moments, the words feel light, effortless, but the weight doesn't vanish. It transfers silently into the expectations of another. And when you don't show up, when you cancel, when you forget, the burden crashes down on them. What breaks is not just the plan, it is trust. The Stoics considered reliability a sacred duty. Seneca in his letters wrote, "Nothing is more valuable than the commitment of a person of integrity, not brilliance, not charm, commitment, because integrity means nothing if your word cannot be trusted." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Imagine if every promise you gave was measured by that standard. How differently would people see you? They wouldn't just hear your words. They would see your character. I learned this lesson the hard way. A friend, Emily, once invited me to her birthday. She had spent weeks preparing every detail, the guest list, the decorations, even the playlist. Her excitement was contagious. I looked her in the eye and promised, "I'll be there." I wouldn't miss it for anything. But when the day came, I let myself get pulled into another plan. Something less important, but more convenient. I thought a quick text would smooth things over. "Sorry, something came up." Her reply was polite, but it was cold, and in that coldness, I felt the truth. I hadn't just missed a party. I had told her, without words, that my promise was worth little. Our friendship dimmed from that night forward. Reliability isn't built by speeches. It isn't rebuilt by apologies. It is proven by action over time. Like bricks laid one after another, each small act of consistency builds the structure of trust. Arriving when you said you would, delivering what you said you would, admitting when you cannot, instead of pretending that you can. These are not grand gestures, they are daily disciplines. And discipline, as the Stoics remind us, is freedom. Think of reliability as currency. Every promise kept is a deposit. Every promise broken is a withdrawal. Keep withdrawing, and soon your account is empty. But make steady deposits, and one day when the stakes are highest, that account will carry you. People will trust you not because of what you say in the moment, but because your life has proven you. I once had a mentor who embodied this principle. He wasn't the loudest in the room, he wasn't flashy, but his word was iron. If he said he would be somewhere, he was there. If he said he couldn't, he said it plainly, without excuses. Over time, his reliability became his reputation. When critical projects arose, he was the one people turned to, not the most charismatic, not the most brilliant, but the one they could count on. His authority came not from demanding respect, but from consistently earning it. This raises a harder truth. Unreliability isn't always malicious. Sometimes it hides beneath what looks like kindness. Saying yes to everything because you don't want to disappoint. But what happens when you can't deliver? You disappoint anyway, only deeper. Better to be honest at the beginning than dishonest at the end. A firm no spoken with integrity preserves respect far more than a soft yes that collapses later. The Stoics were ruthless with themselves about this. Epictetus taught that you should live so your actions are aligned with your words. Anything else was a fracture in the soul. And here's the paradox. The more honest you are about your limits, the more people trust you. Why? Because honesty, even when it disappoints, is still reliability. It proves your word matches reality. Think of a stone bridge. Each kept promise is another stone set carefully in place. With time, the bridge becomes solid, able to carry great weight. But each broken promise is a crack. Too many cracks, and the bridge gives way. People fall. And once they do, they will hesitate to cross again. That hesitation is the quiet erosion of respect. This is not only about others, it is also about you. Every time you fail to honor your word, you weaken your own belief in yourself. You say one thing, do another, and deep down you stop trusting your own voice. But when you live in alignment, when your word and action are one, something powerful happens. You begin to believe yourself, and that belief radiates outward, becoming confidence others can feel. Respect from others begins with respect for yourself. So how do you build this? Start small. Keep a promise to yourself. Wake when you said you would. Finish the task you began. Hold the boundary you set. These small victories teach you discipline, and discipline teaches you freedom. Because the person who can trust their own word walks through the world with a quiet power that needs no explanation. One evening, I met a man who had lost almost everything: job, wealth, position. And yet, those around him still followed him. Why? Because even when stripped of status, he remained reliable. His yes still meant yes. His no still meant no. And that alone made him unshakable. He had learned what many never do. Reliability outlasts circumstance. It is not tied to wealth or power. It is tied to integrity. And integrity never fades unless you abandon it. From here, the challenge is clear. Do not scatter promises like cheap coins. Speak less, but mean more. Let your yes carry weight and your no carry honesty. Build trust, not through declarations, but through the quiet repetition of integrity. Reliability may not make you loud, but it will make you strong. it will make you respected. At this stage, see the pattern. When your word is aligned with your actions, you no longer need to chase trust. Trust arrives naturally because your life proves it. And from this foundation, another discipline emerges. Not about promises, but about presence, the ability to listen fully without the urge to interrupt. Advancing to the third chapter, picture a crowded room where voices overlap like crashing waves. Everyone is eager to speak. No one is eager to listen. The louder each voice becomes, the less any word holds meaning. And in that storm, the rarest presence is not the one who dominates the noise, but the one who listens deeply, patiently, without rushing to reply. That silence, that attention, carries more authority than 100 raised voices. Now think about this. How often do you find yourself waiting for your turn to talk instead of hearing what's actually being said? The urge to interrupt burns inside like a restless flame. We confuse speed with intelligence, interruption with engagement. But interruption doesn't show value, it shows ego. It tells the other person, my thoughts outrank yours. And over time, that message erodes respect, quietly but relentlessly. The Stoics understood the discipline of listening as a kind of wisdom. Epictetus, once a slave and later a philosopher of great depth, said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is not passivity. It is strength under control. It is the discipline of silencing your own inner noise long enough to let another voice arrive fully, and that discipline commands respect. I remember a season early in my career when I failed at this constantly. Meetings were battles where I rushed to prove myself. If someone raised an idea, I cut in. If someone paused for thought, I jumped in to fill the gap. I told myself I was contributing. In truth, I was broadcasting insecurity. One day, my manager looked at me after a meeting and said, calmly but firmly, "You're always ready to speak, but rarely ready to listen." That sentence struck like lightning. Because it was true. I wasn't listening at all. I was waiting to perform. From that moment, I began what I call stoic listening. It is not simply hearing words. It is holding back the tide of impatience inside you. It is letting the other person finish, not just out of politeness, but out of discipline. Each time I felt the urge to cut in, I breathed. I asked myself, does this need to be said now, or can it wait? That pause was harder than any speech I ever gave, but slowly it changed me. Colleagues began to treat me differently. They saw me as steady, not frantic, present, not needy, and my words, fewer but sharper, began to carry more weight. Here is the paradox. People think listening makes them invisible. The opposite is true. Listening makes you unforgettable. Because true listening is rare. In a world starved for attention, the one who offers it becomes magnetic. People gravitate toward those who hear them without judgment, without interruption. Respect grows silently in the soil of attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If someone can show me I am mistaken, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." His humility shows us something vital. To truly listen, you must value truth more than your ego. You must be willing to learn, not just to argue. That is not weakness. That is courage. The courage to admit you do not know everything. The courage to let another's words alter your own. Think of listening like holding a mirror. When you truly attend to someone, you reflect back their humanity. You tell them, you matter here. Your words have weight. That reflection strengthens bonds more than agreement ever could. And in return, you gain something precious: clarity. You see the world not just through your own lens, but through the eyes of another. That perspective sharpens your judgment, making you wiser, calmer, harder to manipulate. I recall a colleague once who was known not for brilliance, but for presence. When you spoke with him, you felt the full weight of his attention. No phone, no fidgeting, no racing to reply. He listened, and when he finally did speak, even briefly, his words landed with the force of someone who had understood completely. People trusted him. They respected him. Not because he dominated meetings, but because he gave others the space to be heard. That, I realized, was leadership born not of noise, but of silence. Listening then becomes a form of discipline, just like fasting or physical training. Each time you resist the urge to interrupt, you strengthen the muscle of patience. Each time you let silence stretch without fear, you sharpen the edge of your presence. Over time, you begin to radiate something rare: consideration. And consideration in a noisy world is power. Here's the hard truth: if you cannot listen to others, you will never hear yourself. The inner voice of reason, of conscience, of wisdom, it is drowned out by the same impatience that interrupts conversations. Train yourself to listen outward, and you will find yourself listening inward too. And the more you hear, the clearer your decisions become. At this stage, reflect on the kind of person you want to be. The one who always speaks, but is rarely heard. Or the one who listens so deeply that when you finally do speak, every word lands with weight. Respect does not come from the volume of your voice. It comes from the strength of your silence, and this brings us forward. If listening turns silence into strength, then gratitude turns adversity into fuel. That is where the next step reveals itself. How to replace the habit of complaint with the discipline of constructive action. Entering the 4th chapter, imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The sky darkens, the rain lashes down, the wind howls against your body. You can shout at the clouds, you can curse the rain, you can shake your fists at the sky, but nothing changes. The storm doesn't bend to your anger. It doesn't care about your complaints. And yet, in that moment, you still have power. The power to choose how you will stand. Will you be soaked in bitterness, or will you endure with calm, knowing the storm will pass? Now think about how often we face smaller storms every day. The traffic that doesn't move. The colleague who takes credit for what you did, the weather that ruins your plans. Our instinct is to complain, to sigh, to mutter, to stew. At first it feels like relief, like steam escaping from a kettle. But what happens when complaint becomes habit? It turns from release into identity. You're no longer someone facing difficulty. You become the person who always has something to grumble about, and people feel it. Slowly, they step back. Not because they hate you, not because they don't care, but because complaint drains energy, and no one wants to stand in the shadow of that storm for long. The Stoics offered a different path. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What he meant was simple but radical. You do not control the storm, but you control your response. Complaining hands away your control. Acting or accepting reclaims it. When you complain, you say, "My peace depends on the weather, on the traffic, on the boss, on the stranger." When you accept or act, you say, "My peace depends on me." That shift is the essence of strength. I remember a period in my life when everything was a reason to complain. If it rained, I sulked. If it was too hot, I sighed. If someone offended me, I carried it for days like a wound I refused to heal, and I told myself it was harmless, just words, just feelings. But slowly, I noticed people keeping their distance. Conversations with me left them heavier, not lighter. Then one day a friend said with honesty I wasn't ready to hear, "It feels like nothing is ever good enough for you." I laughed it off, but the words stayed. They echoed in the quiet. They hurt because they were true. That moment was a mirror. Complaining had become my identity, and with it I had handed away my power. The Stoics teach us, do not waste energy lamenting reality. Transform what can be changed, accept what cannot. Epictetus taught, do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will go on well. That is not fatalism, it is freedom. Because once you stop fighting the inevitable, your energy is freed to act where it matters. From that point, I began an experiment. Each time I felt the urge to complain, I asked one question: is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, accept. If the workplace was toxic, I chose to leave instead of poisoning myself with endless grumbling. If a project failed, I searched for the lesson instead of reliving the frustration. If a situation offered no solution, I breathed deep and moved forward. Slowly, the habit of complaint loosened its grip. I didn't become naive. I didn't pretend everything was perfect. But I became lighter, and those around me noticed. Think of your mind as a radar. It will find whatever signal you train it to find. Feed it complaints, and it will pick up negativity everywhere. A small delay feels like catastrophe. A small inconvenience becomes a mountain. But feed it gratitude, and the radar begins to detect opportunities, blessings, lessons. The world itself doesn't change, but what you see in it does. And respect grows in those who train their minds to see clearly. I recall one morning stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, frustration boiling. My old self would have cursed every red light, pounding the wheel, but I stopped. I told myself, the traffic is not mine to control. My reaction is. I turned on an audiobook and used the time to learn. By the time I arrived, I was calmer than if the road had been empty. That day, I realized the truth. Complaint does not ease reality. It only poisons the person carrying it. Seneca said, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is." Complaining convinces you of misery. Gratitude convinces you of abundance. Which will you choose? Each day, the choice is yours. Gratitude does not mean ignoring hardship. It means refusing to let hardship define you. It means looking at the storm and saying, I cannot stop the rain, but I can choose my posture. It means thanking the struggle for its lesson instead of resenting it for its presence. That shift changes everything. Respect is born in those who can stand firm without whining, who can face difficulty without drowning others in their discontent. At this stage, the path is simple but not easy. Each time complaint rises to your lips, pause. Ask the Stoic question, is this under my control? If yes, act. If no, accept. In that pause lies your freedom. In that freedom lies your dignity. And in that dignity, respect is born. From here, the circle closes. We began with silence, with integrity, with listening, with gratitude. Together, they form a foundation that no storm can erode. And it is from this foundation that true presence emerges. The kind of presence that inspires respect, not through force, but through the quiet strength of character. If you are still here, let me tell you something important. Few people have the courage to look at themselves with honesty. Most prefer to look outward, to blame, to hide. But by staying until this moment, you have proven that you are willing to do the hardest work. The work of turning the mirror toward yourself. That is where real change begins. Respect is never a gift handed to you. It is something you build piece by piece through the choices you make when no one is watching. We have uncovered 4 habits that quietly tear down your image. Gossiping poisons trust. Being unreliable weakens your word. Interrupting steals dignity from your presence. And constant complaining drains both you and everyone around you. These habits seem small, but together they form the cracks through which respect escapes. The beauty is that cracks can be repaired. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the best revenge is to be unlike the one who has done wrong. Apply this to your own life. The best way to command respect is to live differently from the majority. Where others fall into gossip, choose silence. Where others break promises, stand firm. Where others interrupt, practice presence. Where others complain, choose gratitude and action. Each decision might feel small, but together they reshape the way you are seen and the way you see yourself. Do not underestimate the power of slow transformation. 1 step a day, 1 choice at a time. The world does not shift overnight, but your presence grows heavier, more grounded, more unshakable. People begin to notice without you asking. Respect begins to form around your name like a quiet flame that refuses to die out. And with each small victory, your own self-respect deepens, giving you the foundation to stand taller no matter the storm around you. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 4 habits speaks to you most strongly? Write in the comments the phrase, "worthy of respect," as a promise to yourself. Declare which habit you are ready to transform. Writing it down will anchor it in your mind, and it will also remind others here that they are not alone on this path. Together, we create a space where growth is not just an idea, but a lived experience. If this reflection has given you something valuable, I invite you to subscribe so that we can continue walking this road together. Each video is another step, another chance to strengthen your inner discipline and live with clarity. Let subscribing be less about support and more about making a commitment to your own growth and to a community that values depth over noise. As you close this video, carry one reminder with you. You are the only one responsible for the energy you bring into the world. Carry what builds up. Leave behind what diminishes. Choose to be the person others can trust, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Respect is not demanded, it is earned, it is inspired, and it is remembered. And remember, this is not the end of the journey. In the next video, we will go deeper, exploring how to turn inner discipline into an unshakable presence that no challenge can disturb. Until then, walk with calm strength, speak with integrity, and live in a way that makes respect inevitable.